This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Carl Tatz Design, Jay-Z Microphones, Spectra 1964, and Isotope. You're hearing my voice right now through the Jay-Z pop filter on the Jay-Z BB29 microphone in a Carl Tatz designed room through the Spectra 1964 STX 600 mic pre-complimenter and Isotope RX and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC Mercury Extreme Pro 6G SSD. So get ready to rock.
In an ideal situation, you start day one with the record, already having to familiarize yourself with the songs. There's nothing like knowing when something is wrong when you're listening to the basic tracks. It's pretty great when the engineer knows if it's okay or not. I mean, I've been on both sides of the glass so many times that you often don't even know if your performance sucks until you're at home listening to it 3 days later or driving in your car and you realize it's something that really bothers you.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. I used to have an expensive pop filter for my vocal mic that was so fragile, I had to put a sign on it warning singers not to touch it or else the thing would break. But not anymore. Now I've got this super durable pop filter from jzmic.com that sounds fantastic. I don't have to worry about stuff breaking and can focus on making music. Go ahead, grab my pop filter. I dare you. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS and get 20% off the amazing pop filter at jzmic.com. Howdy, Rockstar. Are you ready to discover the secrets to making your mixes sound professional no matter what your studio situation? Then check out my free mixing course, mixmasterbundle.com, where I show you how to get pro-sounding mixes in your DAW using simple techniques and free plugins. And when you're ready for more advanced studio skills, then check out Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can learn from Grammy-winning teachers to help you record, edit, mix, and master your best record ever. Use the code ROCKSTAR for 10% off for a limited time. No matter where you like to rock in the galaxy, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron lets you record with confidence over USB-C with up to more than a gigabyte per second of real-world performance. Transfer tracks in seconds and take your sessions with you anywhere you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crushproof. Find the Envoy Pro Electron and all your OWC storage needs at maxsales.com/rockstars. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Justin Phelps, Chief Engineer and Designer of the Hallowed Halls recording studios in Portland, Oregon. He began his career in '96 at San Francisco's famed Coast Recorders, where he worked as house engineer and received considerable guidance from Chief Engineer Producer John Cuniberti, who's also been a podcast guest here, talking about his One Mic series and some of the records he made, and studio owner and gear guru Dan Alexander, as well as working at some of the Bay Area's finest studios, including The Plant, Prairie Sun, Studio 880, Tiny Telephone, and Studio D. In 2004, Justin acquired the lease for one of the most historic spaces in San Francisco, Hyde Street Studio C, which he restored to its former glory and ran for the next 5 years as one of the busiest rooms in San Francisco when he met his wife, Deanna, and started his family. With the birth of their first daughter, they relocated to Portland, Oregon, where he founded Cloud City Studio, a multi-room facility with a busy mastering suite serving many regional and international acts until 2016, when he opened Hallowed Halls, located in a 5,500 square foot historic turn-of-the-century library where the building's natural acoustics made for an ideal recording studio site. Since then, they've been cranking out records for a wide variety of American and international acts, hosting a constant stream of events benefiting local music and arts community and dabbling in new recording directions. The most prominent of these would be music video production. And actually, I've put together a number of the videos that I found online on YouTube for you rock stars. So if you scroll down in the show notes, you'll be able to go watch many of those beautiful videos. A lot of them are shot live right there in the studio. Also, the COVID-19 era has seen a particularly high spike, no pun intended, in combined music and video as a result of the severe limitations placed on live performance. Necessity, of course, is the mother of invention, and Justin is currently modifying the Hallowed Halls to facilitate concert performances and multi-camera shoots, including VR concerts in Studio A's main hall. Through partnership with a strong concert streaming distribution network, the hope is to use these to get the lifelong patrons of the studio back to work and to find new creative outlets for the music that we all create. So, and as Justin says, so far it's working. Thanks so much to John Cuniberti for making our introduction. Thank you, John. Please welcome Justin Phelps to Recording Studio Rockstars. Justin, are you ready to rock, dude?
I am, Lidge.
How is it to sit there and have to listen to me do your whole intro for you live like that?
I have one takeaway.
One takeaway.
The pun was completely intended.
Okay, good. I figured it was, but I was afraid it would be lost on people if I moved past it too quickly.
I can't say it's too soon because we're still in the spike.
Yeah, well, there you go, man. Well, I know Portland, Oregon has had it particularly challenging over these, past couple of years and stuff, and we don't have to dig too much into that, but we do love to hear about the ways that you have chosen to manage this. Of course, the podcast episode that we're doing now will come out much later than we record it. So hopefully we'll be looking back on this and going like, remember when that craziness was happening?
Boy, we're definitely going to be looking back on it. It's been quite a year.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about Hallowed Halls. You've got quite a track record. It was really actually a lot of fun to see how many studios you've been a part of in different stages of your career. Pretty cool, man. If you want to give us a brief story arc of your recording path, from getting interested in it to now, go ahead. Or if you want to just dive right into Hallowed Halls, tell us about this beautiful place that you've got a library.
Yeah, I could give you a little bit of a storyline.
Yeah.
I was a musician, started pretty young in Portland, playing in the punk rock music scene here back in the mid 80s. And got to San Francisco and joined another band there, and was in art school and really into music, obviously, and often it was the singer of the band or the guy that owned the PA or whatever, so I was kind of techie,
right?
And we finally got a record deal after this is the band Slough-Feg I used to play in, who are still going strong today and doing much better since then.
Yeah,
they hit a big jump in the late 90s, but anyway, we finally got somebody to pay for our record, and we got to the studio, and I'm not going to say the guy's name, and he's retired years ago anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But we got this guy who was just a terrible engineer, and he just put minimal effort into it, and wasn't maybe he just wasn't good with the hospitality side of things or something like that. Didn't take requests well for things and stuff like that. And it was so frustrating because, I could go on and on about what we've been through to get to that point. But, we really, really were dedicating our life to it and living in undesirable situations,
yeah.
trying to make it as a band, which is, was a common thing to do back in the early 90s.
And isn't that a common story of bands in general?
Sure,
I think sometimes we forget just how much dedication and effort the artist has to put into even arriving at the point of being in a studio.
Absolutely. Years and years. And, I always keep that in mind when I'm talking to people about their records that we're doing. It's like how far they've gone to get there, and what I often tell people is it literally is a matter of life and death for them.
Yeah.
You got to take it that seriously. So, we get to that point and we get in there and we have this recording experience and it's terrible. And I'm like, screw this. I'm going to recording school.
Nice.
The ironic part is, I was in school and the next tour came up. We were just doing little mini US tours and I couldn't go.
I thought you were going to say, screw this. I'm going on the road. I'm joining a band.
I didn't do it, man. I chose a career instead because I really liked recording. And then I ended up making a bunch of records with the band, which was, that's fine. And they're still great friends of mine.
Yeah. So we have one of the records I'm looking at right now in the Spotify playlist we put together is Slaufeg Ape Uprising, which is a great sounding record. And I don't know if that was, like you say, made after you had moved away from being in the band and becoming
years after
recording the band.
Yeah, years. That was 12 years after.
Right on. I guess at that point they're like, dude, I think you're out of the band now.
No, it was like, you can't come on tour with us. You mean that? That means we have to get somebody else, right?
Yeah.
No, it was that simple.
Yeah.
They're driven, really driven.
Right on.
And, more power to them. But anyway, yeah, that record's cool. We made that album. We started it. That was a transitional record. We started at Hyde Street Studio C when that was my place, and finished it at the first place I built here in Portland. So we were making the record over the course of the time that I switched cities.
Wow,
which was kind of fun. Mike Scalzi, the band leader, is still just a really, really great close friend of mine. And he came up and we did the last of the overdubs and mixed it up here after I was settled in.
And that the first studio up there was the Cloud. How did you say it? Cloud City?
Cloud City. Well, there was first a place I built. I'm just gonna make this sound horrible because it's funny.
Did you just hang a lot of mixed clouds?
I built a place under a bridge downtown, and
nice.
No, it was actually kind of nice. It was like this 6-room thing, and I did it on my own dime. Sank $30,000-$40,000 worth of credit into it, and it was a cool spot, but it wasn't the sort of traditional studio setup that I was used to. With the big tracking room and the nicely, isolated control room and everything.
Yeah.
And we got some stuff done there. I did some Secret Chief stuff there and the Slaufeg thing. And, really my first round of recordings when I got up here. But then about a year and a half later, I met what was really the closest thing to like an old school engineer I could find in Portland, Rick McMillan, who's a great guy. And, we're still friends now. But he was, at that point, I think about late 50s, maybe, something like that, and had built this place and had this huge business that he was trying to operate himself and hadn't really finished building the recording studio. And I went over there and met him. He was mastering an album I did for a band here called Don't. Sam Henry was playing drums, and Sam and he had known each other since the 60s when they went to school together. But I looked around, and it's like, there's this amazing multi-room studio that's like, 60, 75% of the way there construction wise. And I'm just like, hey dude, like, you want me to just finish this place for you and like, come work at it? He's like, I've been waiting for you to call. That was his words.
Nice.
And so we did it. We built that studio, and that was a great studio. We had a good run there. A lot of great bands came in there. Medeski, Martin and Wood, Mountain to Goats, a lot of the bigger local acts. It was good. Place.
That's pretty cool. Medeski, Martin, and Wood were fantastic. I think I recorded them twice down at my Bonnaroo studio, and they just sounded so good.
Yeah. Good players, huh?
Yeah. And then I've had the pleasure to record Chris Wood coming back with the Wood Brothers a couple more times too. And
he was my favorite guy in that group to work with.
He's so dedicated, he's super focused.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, you jump in to help finish out a studio. One of the thoughts that crossed my mind as you were talking about going from San Francisco and being in these sort of big professional studios to starting over again. And what you described as the difference, you talked about the big room with the big space to record in. If you had to choose between having a perfectly set up control room or a perfectly set up recording space, which one do you think you would go for first if you found yourself having to choose as you were trying to put your studio together?
I've made it work with bad control rooms. It's not fun, but I mean, I would rather the artist be comfortable and have it be a really good experience for them, and I'll like sit on a bucket in a closet with it.
Yeah, I think we've all done that too.
Yeah, I've been there.
Set up in a basement.
Right.
Okay, cool. Well, so tell us a little bit more about Hallowed Halls now. I mean, you guys have this beautiful space and it's essentially a library that's been converted.
Yeah, it's a Carnegie Library. So it's a historical building. It's a historical landmark. And it goes way back. 1918 is when it was completed. It's got a really cool musical history. So back in the late 40s, I believe. Please, historians, don't call me up about this, but I think that's pretty accurate. Woody Guthrie was hired by the Bonneville Power Administration, or that company that built the Bonneville Dam here, which is the hydropower company on the Columbia River, to come and write 27 songs about the Columbia River area. And some of them are, the kids sing in school now and stuff like that. Roll on Columbia and stuff like that. If you know anything about Woody Guthrie, he wasn't a very straight-laced character. He was pretty revolutionary, really. And a pretty cool dude. I mean, I think he's inspirational for a lot of folk musicians in the modern day. Anyway, he happened to set up, camp right down the street from the studio. And the first concert in there, like in the late 40s, maybe around 50, was he and Pete Seeger playing some of those songs, in the Carnegie Library that was there.
Wow.
So I think that's an awesome kickoff.
Right. Indeed.
Just a freaking amazing. Almost better than Hyde Street Studio C. That one's pretty hard to beat.
So now when they were playing there, of course, there were books on the shelves. So you had natural book diffusion. And we want to know, inquiring minds want to know, did you keep the books on the shelves when you guys moved the studio in?
No. I mean, it had ceased to be a library in 1972.
Okay.
And then after that, it became the first building in the state of Oregon to be named after a woman, a woman named Leah Wickman, who was a Swedish immigrant who used it for all kinds of community action organizations and meetings and things like that. And which is also, really cool in its own way, but it hadn't been a library for 30 years before we got there.
Okay.
And what happened is it was finally sold to private owners in 2014. And within just a few months, we were around town looking for a place to build this studio because Cloud City was closing. Rick was retiring. And a guy had hired me who, had come into a lot of money and wanted to give some back to the local music community. And I'd made a record with him and his band. And he knew I was the guy that built this other place that we'd recorded and I could do a good job of it. We went around and, did the thing with the snare drum and banged at different rooms. And I showed up at that place on my own because I just kind of happened by it. And it's this amazing looking building from the outside. I don't know if you have seen any pictures of it, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, and reminder again, Rockstars, we put together a YouTube playlist, so there's a fair amount of videos. There's a couple where people are walking up to go start their record there.
Yeah, the outside gets a lot of photography.
Yeah, you guys still have a cupola on top, don't you?
Yeah.
There you go.
That's right. Yep. And one day, I haven't done it yet, but maybe by the time this thing is aired, I'm going to wire that thing to be a ISO booth.
Oh, nice, man. That'd be great.
I mean, that'd be a fun place to cut a vocal, right?
At least put a camera up there that you can, remote control from down below and get a view of the area or something.
No way, man. Mic panel and headphone jack.
Do you guys have a weather vane on there? You can be like, listen, you come here, we know which way is up or north or something like that.
We'll show you which way the wind blows.
Yeah, we'll show you which way the wind blows for your record. Do you need to record direct stereo keyboards? Spectra 1964 now offers the Stereo BBDI-2 with custom wound high-Z transformers for big headroom, virtually flat response, and a 15 dB input pad. The Spectra 1964 BBDI passive direct box is also perfect for recording deep bass that will make your mixes sound huge. Plug that into a C610 comp limiter, and as founder Bill Cheney points out, it'll move your pant leg. Get your sound moving at spectra1964.com. With so many game-changing iZotope plugins to choose from, deciding which one to buy next could be a bit of a challenge. But did you know that now you can have all their plugins through iZotope's new affordable subscription bundle, Music Production Suite Pro, for only $19.99 per month? Get your Rockstar extended 30-day free trial subscription now at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Yeah, it reminds me of shopping for my house. And in order to decide that I was going to buy this house, I brought over a snare drum, just like you said. And I had my buddy, Ken Coomer from the band Wilco, come over and he set up in the basement and just banged the shit out of the snare for me. And I walked over all the way around the house and I was like, yep, that's isolated enough. I can make records here.
Nothing cuts like a snare drum, right?
Yeah. So, all right. So you guys listen to some different rooms and stuff. And what have you got? Now you have 2 studios in there, right?
Yeah, well, 3 technically.
Okay.
So there's 3, and then there's a media room that we're building for all the video stuff that also has a mastering room set up in it.
Right.
But there's Studio A, which is it's a copy of Abbey Road Studio 2, more or less. I just looked at the square footage, and I was kind of looking at blueprints for different studios around, and just for some ideas. And I was like, wow, same exact area. And so we just made it the same proportions, which just seems to be a really good size. I think it's pretty close to the golden mean.
Right. And we're talking about the recording space.
Yeah, the main hall.
Okay.
There's 3 ISO booths around it.
But now I've seen pictures of Studio A, and it looks like a big room with some treatments on the walls and stuff. What were some of the, did you guys actually change the size and shape of the room as well?
We did, yeah. So we had to, make a huge, 3-layer wall, about maybe a quarter away across the room from the north wall, which holds the 2 closest ISO booths to the control room and the control room itself.
I see.
And those are all, nothing's a right angle. It's all worked out angularly to create interesting spaces within that.
Very cool. So you guys started with one big ass space, and then you looked at it and said, okay, how can we sort of insert a control room and some ISO booths? And also shape the live room to be the golden dimensions. What are golden dimensions as far as you can remember? Not the numbers necessarily, but what's the concept?
It's 1 to 1.6.
Okay. What does that mean?
So 1 by 1.6. So, if you got a 100-foot wide room, you'd want 160 feet long.
Okay. And then does the height matter too? Probably.
Not that I know of. I mean, that's just that shape, right?
Okay. All right. Dig it. Yeah.
I mean, the height certainly matters for recording.
Yeah.
I think that was the main attraction to the space, is that it's got those 17-foot ceilings.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful space. And one of the things that is particularly useful about big spaces is it really drops the low frequencies down. It really lets the lows speak really well. They're not getting bounced back off the walls so much.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how, I've attempted to have, recording studios in places with 8-foot ceilings. And I mean, man, it really affects. Yeah. It really does. It just thins it right out.
Yeah. Well, very cool. So let's see, you also started out with John Cuniberti. What were some things that you got to do with him and before you made it up to Portland? And
John is my original mentor. He's the chief engineer at the studio I interned at.
What do you remember learning from him then?
I learned a lot of things from him. I mean, John's a great engineer, and good friend too. But it's sort of like a thoroughness, just a level of professionalism, a really great work ethic. Just no BS. We're here to make this record, and that's what we're doing. I think it probably has helped me a lot in my career. Kept me working. Bringing some of those same traits into the way I do things. Had
he already done his work with Joe Satriani by the time we were there? Or did you guys work on?
He was in the middle of it. I mean, he'd already done his first few records with him.
Yeah.
But I worked with him on a couple of them later. I think at the time that I was at Coast, there was one that came in that he was working with Mike Frazier on. Or maybe it was Eric Valentine. I think that's what it was.
Nice. And
maybe
then
both. I think it was both, actually.
Has John been up to do his one mic series with you up there yet?
Oh yeah, he came into the Hallowed Halls and did it there. We did 3 really good things with bands I've been working with. Lynx, a local singer-songwriter named Christopher Worth, and a band that has toured quite a bit that some of the listeners might be familiar, called the Shook Twins. And
what if you were going to explain to the rock stars what the one mic series is? Maybe tell us what you guys did.
Well, it's a great thing that John invented. Basically using a bloom line technique to capture a band entirely. So, it's one mic with 2 elements. The one that we've been using is an R88, the one that he uses, and he's taken that thing around to a lot of really interesting recording spaces, classic, famous studios. He did one at Sun Records, Muscle Shoals, some other places. And it's an ingenious technique. I mean, basically the idea is that you're mixing with sound pressure level as opposed to faders with electronics.
Right.
And to watch him do it is really cool. It's he'll we'll get it all set up, and we did for those three things, got it all set up, and then he come in and listen. He put the headphones on. He's like, oh, a little more of this. And you go out there and you talk to the drummer. Okay, you got to hit that more appropriately, right? It's not like he's asking them to do something weird. It's almost like he's training them to play with a better sense of arrangement.
Right.
And I think every one of those groups walked away a better band for it.
And a reminder, so this would be a session where the band's all playing. The only mic that's picking everything up is that stereo mic in the middle, and nobody's got headphones on.
No.
Right.
Wait, actually, sorry. Some of them did have headphones just so they could hear themselves better.
Yeah, maybe
singers.
Yeah, because if you're playing drums and the singer's way up in front of you, facing away from you towards the mic, that could be a challenge. So having a pair of headphones back there would probably help.
Also, some people, when they're singing, they need to hear themselves a little more in there.
Yeah. Well, so now you've got this Hallowed Halls, 3 different studios, one of them sort of doubling as a mastering room. Maybe one of the questions I was just going to ask was, since you've been doing this for a while, how do you feel like recording and music has changed for you since you started? But if you want to sort of like fast forward to the bigger changes that are happening this past year as a result of all these limitations, feel free to do that.
Well, I mean, we made it through the 2000s. That wasn't really fun for anybody, I don't think.
Yeah, because of downloading and all that.
From an industry standpoint,
yeah,
it was pretty. I did things during that period that I don't care to speak of.
You mean like musical creations?
Just working in weird places, but we made it through. Now it seems like people have a little more of a hope for some return on their recordings. So, they're willing to put a little more into it. They just have a little more value for the recordings, which is, as a recording engineer, that's incredibly refreshing. I've seen that come around in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I mean, just to put it in some context, the 90s was like, it was like the golden age of music making for us, because it was, like independent music became popular and record labels were sort of throwing money at bands and projects. And then that sort of evaporated with digital downloading and live, music, MP3s being put up on the internet. And so I guess 2000s was sort of like the other end of that spectrum, where that was dying off quickly, and, or I don't know what, maybe musically, it was a different styles are being introduced. But now things have come around where we're in the DIY era. And now, of course, like, specifically right now, we'll see what people think by the time this episode airs. But NFTs are like the hot topic all over the internet and on Clubhouse app and stuff like that. So, what are some things that you're seeing with bands? Seeing some reward for their hard efforts with making records.
Well, it's a little of an unusual year. I mean, I think that a lot of people got really into vinyl in the last couple of years, and as a result of being able to sell it at the merch table, and just saw that as a great way to make money. I mean, some of the bands that would spend a lot of the year on tour that I was working with, I mean, they were really enthusiastic about recording, because recording just meant extra income from the shows, and that was great. But some of the artists that are a little more savvy and kind of get into the sync licensing world and, set up their streaming situation correctly, they're making paychecks. I mean, maybe they're not getting rich, but I mean, they're getting paid.
They're paying their mortgage.
Exactly. Where I think, by the time we got about 2005, 2006, I mean, labels, it was almost like making records was just like this sort of like, well, we're going to have to do that.
Right.
You couldn't really blame them. They weren't going to see any return from it. Because, the vinyl thing hadn't really picked up at that point. So CDs as merch, weren't really as attractive as I think a t-shirt or something. You just download it or whatever, right? Or watch it on YouTube.
Right. Whereas vinyl feels like something for real, something really valuable.
Isn't vinyl cool?
Oh yeah, it's cool. I mean, my daughter, who's, 15 now, she didn't ask me for a CD for Christmas. She asked me for a record player and some vinyl records.
I mean, I've still got my 80s record collection, and even some that I stole from my parents back in the 70s.
I'm embarrassed to say mine disappeared. However, I do have a wind-up Victrola from my great-grandfather, and I got it refinished and rebuilt down here in Nashville. So I have a collection of old 78s.
Wow, that's fun.
It's pretty awesome. I don't wind it up every day, but when I want to impress somebody, I'll wind it up.
I've hoarded a pretty huge cabinet full of those from my grandparents. And, you can have them if you want to come over here.
Hell yeah, man. All right. How long a drive is it?
Yes, hop, skip, and a jump.
Believe it or not, I've done it before. I've done the Nashville to Portland and Salem drive before.
Anyway, we're working on our second room of album covers over at the Hallowed Halls, because it seems like just about everything that comes out now comes out on vinyl.
Oh, cool. So you're collecting the covers of records you guys finish and just like putting them up
we just put them up like artwork. It's cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And also just to hold that physical copy of the record, I just got one yesterday, and you just pull it out and you're like, it's in there, right? It's so different than like a file.
Now, do you feel like, a translation of that, if the bands are feeling like this is working, then there's a trickle down. Then hopefully it means the studios feel like this is working. And hopefully it means that the engineers who want to, do this for a living and make records feel like this is working. On your website, you guys have a great list of all the engineers that work there at the studio. I thought that was really nice the way you guys did that, including I'll give a shout out to my classmate, David Strite. David, how you doing, dude? Hope you're doing well. Talk a little bit about the, what it feels like to be an engineer in that situation.
Over at the studio there? Well, it's a place that I designed myself. So, it's just perfect for me. I like to have a couple different sonic environments for tracking. That main hall is amazing sounding on a lot of different things, but very specifically drums and horns. And, a lot of stuff I do has a lot of both of those in it. So I just love the sound of the room. We don't have to rely so heavily on plugins. The room, it's got an incredible acoustics.
That's great.
You just put up a really nice pair of room mics and you just got that and you can mix it in. Everything gets all wide and beautiful sounding. And even close mic stuff, a little bit will leak in. I purposely left it pretty live in there. I didn't want to get rid of that. If you look at pictures of the room, you can see that there are some baffles kind of surrounding the place. And we have some big gobos that we can roll in and make it really tight too if we want to. But for the most part, that big room is meant to be a big, live, spacious experience where you can track, I think the biggest band I tracked in there at the same time was 19 people. It's like a big band, but done with some isolation. So you can really do a lot with a space that big, which is
that's cool.
It gives it a lot of its own power in that way because of the size of it.
The first time I heard a Carl Tatz Phantom Focus mix room featuring his PFM HD 1000 series monitors, I was completely blown away. It was like listening to three-dimensional sound with rock-solid bass all the way down to 20 hertz. It was really incredible. What's amazing is that a Phantom Focus system can be implemented in your existing control room or even bedroom studio, giving you world-class sound for mixing. Go see how cool your studio could look and sound at phantomfocus.com. Now, you guys have also done, I think you were mentioning that video had been a big part of making things work for artists too.
So there's been a huge demand for it, and we're just going for it. For me, it's like, I made a lot of records, and I've kind of made my decisions on what I want to put my focus into, more based on just kind of what I'm more personally into. So a lot of them are kind of quirky or experimental, or just have to do with my teenage taste in music. Mm-hmm. But I'm kind of have been looking for like maybe something new. I never want to stop making albums. I love it, but and this video thing is just really fun, and it ties into an experiment I did a few years ago. So I play in bands, and I still do now. And the band that I was in at that time was playing a big club in town called the Hawthorne Theater. And I set up a little recording thing over by the front of house mixer, just like one of those Tascam little 4-track things, and recorded the guys' mix and through mics and just did like a little live recording while we were up there on the stage with a nice sound system. And listen back later and I'm like, man, we played that show and we weren't like the world's tightest band. We were pretty good. We didn't miss a single note. I mean, it was just perfect. And, we'd recorded enough that I was like, what's the difference there? Why is it that when we all go in the studio together and everyone's doing things part by part, or maybe playing together, it takes, 10 takes to really get it right. And even then there's still some punch-ins to do. And you got to do the vocal 15 times where you're really happy with it.
Right. But when you guys played it live, somehow it all came together at the same time.
When you're in front of an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started thinking about animals and how natural instinct works with adrenaline and things like that. And I thought about cats and how a cat can run at a fence and there can be a gap exactly as wide as the cat's skull in that fence. And it'll hit it full speed and blow through it like it's nothing, right? Because it's just all in its animal world. It's not making any mistakes. And I was like, I think when people are on stage, they kind of get into that mode. It's like the pressure's on and they just nail it. They're working at a higher emotional level.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm like, that's valuable for art, right? So we did an experiment at the studio, and the Hallowed Halls is a big enough place that we could do this. This was a few years ago with a band called World's Finest, who are a really cool kind of like ska band. Stompgrass, I think, is the technical term for this particular record we made.
Nice.
And so we set up the band, and I set it all up in kind of a stage setup where the amps were into the room of the drums, and I had some baffles behind the amps, and they were close mics, so the amps weren't getting into the drums, and everything was isolated, even though it was in the same room. And the band, we ran through a full day of cutting takes for this EP, these 5 songs, and we did them all. And then at about 5:00, I set up some PA speakers and ran the vocal tracks through the PA, which were further out from the band, so they were still not getting into the individual instrument mics. And they brought in a crowd of about 40 people that filled the other half of the room. And they just had a great time. They played a show to their friends, but everything was still mic'd up and still rolling, with this sort of studio level sound quality.
Yeah.
The next morning we met up at the place and we compared, so we did the standard thing. We'd run through a bunch of takes and got to the point where we were happy with the takes, and we were doing it in a sort of standard recording setup. And we took our masters from that and put them side by side with the takes done with the audience in front of them and people dancing and getting all excited and reacting to the band. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was night and day as far as the value of the take went. The live ones just smoked the studio ones, right? And that was the record, all 5. That we just chose every one of them. That's what became this EP. And so I started thinking about it, and I'm like, man, live recording is kind of where it's at, as long as you're not worried about being able to do all the overdub layers and stuff like that. So it takes a certain kind of production, obviously. And so this is where it kind of ties back around to, what we started talking about here before I went on this big looping thing, the video production side. So if we can do studio level, not quite streamed concerts, but in studio concerts, live in studio, I think that we can get something that is new to a fan of the band, where you have a studio quality recording done, because you got the Neve console there and all the nice mics and everything, and we can mic it in a way that things are isolated and in a way that we can make it sound really great and really hi-fi and like a record. But at the same time, you have the band standing there in front of you, on your screen or in your VR goggles or whatever. I mean, to me, that's a new level of quality there.
Yeah, that's cool. So so the band is performing live, but would there be, how would you generate the sense of excitement? Would you have some audience in there, or would the audience be online?
Yeah, we've done a lot of these through this last year, and I remember the first couple, it was such a new thing that the band would stop playing, because they're just so used to having a crowd in front of them, and it's just nothing. And it's this incredibly awkward moment. Right? And then we started to figure out that okay, we just need a couple super fans in there. So you put a couple people in there and they're just going to freaking go nuts when the band stops. And it's almost kind of funny, but it's better than nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we got through that a little while, pretty well. And then the other option is just cutaways where you just don't even have space in between, which is probably the best way to deal with that. But now we can have 25 people in that big space. It's such a big room that we can fill it to quarter capacity, and it's 110 capacity in there.
Mm-hmm.
So with the band and the crew, you still have room for about 15, 16 people in the audience. And so we're starting to have people in there while people are playing. And, we're in early March. I think it's like the 10th day or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the governor here in Oregon has just announced that we can now do half capacity. So all of a sudden now, I can have 40 people in the room. And at that point, I mean, especially if you're talking about, like a small club kind of thing, like people are used to playing to 40 people.
Yeah, totally. No, that can feel
careers,
that can feel great. I mean, and I like the tip for all of us, which is like, put the band in there, do the recording like a normal session until you get settled and you're like, okay, everything's sounding right. Then bring in enough super fans to do a performance after a break or the next day or something like that, and go from there. And I think that's a clever way to do it.
And then you get that thing, that adrenalized live performance that, like I said, I very scientifically conducted this experiment. and
right.
I guarantee that 9 times out of 10, it's going to be special, right? You're going to have something different than you would get in a controlled studio environment where someone's in there with the headphones and it's just them and they're just trying to get it right and they're sweating the details and the producer's telling them what to do and stuff like that. Like, just get them out there and let them go for it and let them deliver their performance the way they know how to do it and capture that, right?
Right. Why do the thing where everybody's overthinking it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a place for everything. I mean, sometimes that record's cool too, but this is just something I want to get into. It's a personal quest.
I love using iZotope plugins for my music and podcast productions. In fact, you're hearing Ozone and RX on my voice in this podcast episode. And now you can get access to all the iZotope plugins through the new subscription bundle. For only $19.99 per month, Music Production Suite Pro is designed for the serious recording, mixing, and mastering engineer, putting the finishing touches on music, film, and podcasts with fully pro versions of Ozone, RX, Neutron, Nectar, Neoverb, Tonal Balance Control, Visual Mixer, and more, including free plugin updates. And just for you rock stars, get an extended 30-day free trial subscription at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Coupon not valid for subscription. The Envoy Pro Electron is the fastest, toughest, mini-sized, universal portable USB-C SSD that lets you record from anywhere in the galaxy with confidence. With speeds of up to more than a gigabyte per second real-world performance, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron gives you high-speed audio data for recording and playback. Take your sessions and sample libraries with you anywhere you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crushproof. Never worry about the storage and safety of your work again. Find the new OWC Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Justin Phelps, joining us from the Hallowed Halls studios in Portland, Oregon. Justin, are you ready to jam?
Yeah.
All right. I still don't really actually know what that means, but I like to say it to kick off the second half of the show.
No, I've actually got some toast right here. I'm spreading.
Right. Where's our live audience? When are we going to do a live podcast audience? I think you're inspiring me here. Let us know. One of the things you mentioned was, like doing video production or like you're in VR looking around. So that caught my ear. Are you guys thinking about, VR, virtual reality, sort of like the next level of experience? What do you know about it? What are you excited about? Anything you're trying yet?
It's been on my mind a lot. And I did a session not long ago with Rabil Sadiq. Really happy to work with him. I was, already kind of a fan of his music, when he came in. And he came in and we did that soundtrack work for the Rick and Morty game, which is out by now.
Right.
And so at the session were a couple of his partners in the video game company. And so I talked to them a bit about it because I was already thinking about this. And, they were like, hey, look, man, like, that's what we do. And the technology is just sitting there. Like, you basically just need to insert the content.
Yeah.
And, I just got my kids for Christmas at that point, the Oculus Quests.
Oh, man, me too.
And they're cool, right?
Preaching to the choir.
I was kind of putting that on, and I was thinking about, like, man, like, I could be at a show in here. And it'd be great seats, of course. I mean, why wouldn't it be just like front and center? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And did you play that game Beat Saber? Did you try that one?
Yeah.
That's my favorite. That was
I did pretty good.
It's hard.
Anyhow, so we've purchased some 360-degree cameras, and my partners on the concert production company that were in the middle of this big lighting install at this point, which should be done soon, are very into the 2-dimensional side of things, which is also cool and, has its value. But, we'll be putting up some 360-degree cameras in there, so that, I mean, the fun thing about those is that there's very little editing to be done. You're basically just putting somebody in there in that spot in front of the stage.
Right.
And
now, when you say
it's
cameras, plural, what I'm trying to picture how that works. I picture sort of one camera, which equals me, and I'm just looking around to my left or right. How do you do something with more than one camera?
I mean, Lidge, what if you could switch seats?
What if I could switch seats? How do I do that? Do I just like press a button and switch seats? Maybe.
Yeah, it's an app. But the idea is that you have thrthree front row seats.
Cool.
I don't know about you, but when I have an opportunity to see a band from close up, like, I like to go look at the pedals. It's just me.
I love being up close to the stage.
I may want to go over to where the guitar player or the bass player is, and like kind of check out what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea that you can change positions in the room is pretty easy to accomplish. You're just accessing one of the other VR streams, but it definitely creates a more dynamic experience for the viewer. Now,
have you thought about doing a camera at each instrument position too?
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you mean like on the stage?
Yeah, like the drummer's perspective.
No. We want to stick with the classic concert format.
Okay, groovy.
There's a lot of that around already anyway, and to me, that's not how the show. I mean, the stage is set up in a way that it's supposed to be seen from the front.
Right. Yeah.
And it looks awesome that way. Our whole light array is all set up that way. The whole deal is just, that's where you're supposed to be.
Groovy.
It's designed for that person right there in the front row to just have this amazing experience. But to me, it's like, okay, so, I've got two children, and my teenager is way into music at this point. And I asked them, so, your favorite artist right now. I'm not going to say who it is because it'll change by the time this interview comes out, and then they'll be embarrassed. But what if you could put on that Oculus and you could go to a concert, and that person is literally standing 4 feet in front of you, singing directly to you? And they were like, I would make it 2 songs, and then I would have to take a break. It'd be so like intensely enjoyable and like just an experience that I wouldn't be able to handle it for more than like a couple songs. I'd have to put it on and then go back to it again.
So yeah, I agree with you. I think it would be a really cool experience. I think one of the things I get tripped up on a little bit is like, okay, so if I turn my head, does the music need to follow the band, or does it make more sense to just have a really killer stereo mix in your earphones? I did just looking around at stuff.
I sat down and I mapped out a whole like panning chart for how you would work that, with different lengths of reverbs and stuff. Maybe like some filtering as you got further away. And I just kind of decided that it was unnecessary. I mean, I've never enjoyed the sound of the back of the room. Like, usually I'm there, because, in a crowd, because it's crowded and I don't want to be up in the pit or whatever, because I'm old, but it sounds mushy back there and you can't hear any of the detail, and you really want to be up at the front. So I think it's better for it just to be that front row, intense, just, purposely mixed experience the whole time.
Right. So what you hear when you're watching this VR experience is you hear what the control room mix sounds like.
Exactly, which is, a
yeah.
cut above the concert sound for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's cool. And I mean, the best way to find out if that's a great idea is just do it. And if it's a fun experience, you win,
So we have been, and it's going good. I mean, this is our main focus at the studio right now. I mean, I've still got a big recording client base, and as we speak, I'm in the middle of 3 different albums. But this is just I'm spending about half my time on this right now because I just think it's a really cool direction to go in, and not a lot of people are doing it. And the Hallowed Halls is just perfect for it. Just happens to me just the way it's laid out. It's just a really good site for that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's cool because I'd thought about doing something like that too. I used to do a session called stereo sessions out of my studio, and we'd shoot everything with iPhones, and I'd have to edit it all later. But it was also just like a live 2-mix. And I thought, what would it be like to just put a 360 camera in there instead, and still do the same thing, but be able to look around at everything. A little different, a little bit more like what you said. No, don't do that, which is like, it'd probably just be parked in the middle of a band in the studio in my case. But,
right.
But I like the idea of, having this front row seat and doing a real performance. That's exciting stuff. And then, when I look at the VR stuff, what also got me really excited about playing some of the games in there, was the possibility of actually starting to have that be part of how you create music in the studio. Like, why have a keyboard and look at a flat screen if operating Pro Tools could be more like reaching around and grabbing things and moving things in space? Have you been thinking like that at all, or are you is it more focused on the band performance at this point?
It's funny. I went to, well, I'm not going to say it's funny. It's it's a vision that the recording school that I went to back in the mid 90s, that was the dream of the owner of that studio.
Oh, really?
The Virtual Mixer. And
what school was that?
At the school, it was called the California Recording Institute.
Oh, cool.
And it doesn't exist anymore. And unfortunately, it went out of business back in '99, I think, something like that.
This is in San Francisco?
Yeah, back in San Francisco. And so it was there for throughout, I think, that decade, before there was really a lot of other recording schools around. Full Sail opened up Expressions over in the East Bay right about the time that studio was closing, and some of the staff from that school went over to Expressions, and as far as I know, they still work there today. But anyway, that was what he wanted to do. He wanted to create this like sort of touch screen, like VR gloves kind of thing, where you could mess with panning and depth of field and things like that with these balls. And the technology was almost impossible to achieve back then, but man,
right.
He tried really hard, like way back then. That was the idea. And I got to say, like a lot of people, kind of gave him like, kind of like, it's kind of funny, like stuff back then. It seemed ridiculous to them. And why would you do that? But, the interest is just continued to expand into that.
Well, it reminds me of going to school, and they had those damn bubble charts for like what, to try and graphically visualize a band.
Mm-hmm.
And I always fucking hated those things because I
almost wonder if it came from him. I swear he was the innovator on that stuff.
I don't know. I was always like, hi-hat doesn't look like a ball of blob in space, but I love
either. Not me either.
Yeah. But that, all that aside, joking aside, I love the idea of being able to manipulate and control the sound in a much more ergonomic way,
Yeah. Well, we're getting into that stuff with the Raven screens and things,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like playing music has been ergonomic for a long time until it, became a computer, became your instrument. But it'd be cool for the engineering side of it to feel much more ergonomic again. Because it started out that way, didn't it? When we started, it was like, it's all about get up out of your chair, go move a mic, come on back, adjust a knob, a fader, listen, go move things. And then it became, clickety clack on a keyboard with a mouse.
Yeah. I still, once in a blue moon, mix a record on a console.
One of the challenges for recording your voice is getting close enough to the microphone that you get a great bass boost proximity effect without getting blasts of wind on the microphone. Try this experiment. Hold your hand in front of your mouth and say, peanut butter popcorn. Feel that blast of air on your hand? That will cause a terrible sound on your microphone called a plosive. My favorite way to avoid this is to use the JZ microphone pop filter in front of a mic. This thing is built like a tank with a flexible metal arm that I can clamp directly onto the mic stand. It has a super cool waveguide design that looks like ripples on water and prevents the plosives getting through to the mic no matter how explosive the voice gets. Plus, it lets the high frequencies through for superb clarity on the mic. Get your vocals just right and use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 20% off the amazing pop filter at jzmic.com. The STX-100D from the Spectra 1964 Custom Shop is the big brother to the now famous STX-100. A fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers, the STX-100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Ardent, AdVision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 complementer, then check out the new STX600 modules, combining the STX100 mic pre and C610 complementer in a single 500 module. Now you can get that same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's, BBDI, and complementers. Go to spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. Now you have a cool Neve console there. Tell us about that.
The Genesis 48. Yeah, it's great. I like it a lot. I started on Neves back at Coast Recorders, and then at Hyde Street and Prairie Sun, and in Studio B at the plant. There was just Neves everywhere, and really got a Neve preamp. The way it reacts sounds right to me. Other things are different. And to have a Neve where everything works on it, is kind of cool.
Yeah,
It's a novelty. Like every single button on that thing works because it's a new Neve. Now it's a modern thing, so it's a digitally controlled analog path on it. But we spent the extra money and we got the 8068 style EQ channel in there.
Cool.
Whatever underneath the surface of the thing that's in there. So they say, but it does sound nice. And it's got the classic 88 mic preamps, which are fine for me. We have a lot of outboard mic preamps too, if we ever want to switch to a Day King or something like that, or something with tubes. But for the most part, you can pack the room full of musicians out there and just line it up on the board and just it makes setup really fast. You just work your way down.
Doesn't the Genesis also control Pro Tools if you want it to, or something like that?
That's something that I've been wanting to take the time to get into. There's a plugin you have to buy, and it's not very expensive. And you basically install it on each one of your tracks in Pro Tools, and then it interfaces with the Genesis computer.
Oh, okay, cool.
So basically, I think you can control about half, which is pretty great. That's a lot, really. And then when you want to use, some 1176s or, just some sort of really cool compressor or something like that, or, an EQ, an outboard EQ or something like that. But especially something that is dynamically sensitive. It's not after your Pro Tools automation, right? There's that thing with, kind of the hybrid mixing in the box thing where you do all your automation in Pro Tools and then spit it out on a console. But then when you put, some limiters after your automation, it's being affected by, how loud you want to turn the vocal in certain spots, stuff like that. And it's not really the way things are supposed to be done.
Right. In other words, you're bringing up the automation level, but all it's doing is pushing it harder into the limiter.
You're compressing.
Yeah. It's always one of those challenges.
So it's a way around that, which is cool. I went right at the start of the COVID shutdown. I was down in San Francisco mixing a record down at Hyde Street. a really great album that you can't find online because it came out on John Zorn's label. He's like anti-internet or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's called Red Fiction. If you get a chance to check it out, it's Jason Schimmel from the Secret Chiefs. It's one of his solo projects, but it's just fantastic music. And we went down there and mixed it on the 8068 in Studio A at Hyde Street, using like the 60s echo chamber and the plates and all the kick butt old outboard gear and stuff like that. The blue stripe 1176s and stuff.
Yeah,
and it just made for a really cool record. It's very experimental. It's very kind of Mr. Bungle-esque in its complexity, but also very original sounding. And it was fun to mix on the board again. We did it entirely in the console, with just some light fader moves and stuff like that.
Tape or Pro Tools?
All tape.
Nice, man. Talk about tape versus Pro Tools. What do you dig about tape? If we have a chance to choose one or the other, what should we do and why should we do it?
Well, honestly, I don't miss it as much, I think, as some people do. I think most people that started on tape don't miss it as much as, people that have kind of gotten into it more recently. When Pro Tools went HD was the day I had to stop transferring things from the 2-inch machine into Pro Tools to then get into like the editing and things like that.
In other words, you started recording straight into Pro Tools.
I started recording straight to Pro Tools. Yeah. So that was a while back now. So, I kind of turned my back on that, although I do own an MTR 90, and occasionally I'll use it mostly for transfers and stuff like that. But every once in a while we fire it up for recording. Mm-hmm. It's got a sound and it's cool. I think more times than not, it sounds better coming off tape than going onto it. But it's kind of disappointing those times it doesn't sound as good coming back from it.
Right.
Because and at that point the client has already invested $1,000 in tape, so you don't really have the option to not use it.
Right.
One thing I really like is to get tape involved in the mastering process.
Okay.
So either print mixes to it or just find a mastering guy that's got a great sounding, ATR 102 or something like that sitting there that can bounce the mix off it at the last minute. I do really enjoy that sound. I almost every time I prefer it.
How would you describe what it does to the sound when you do that?
Well, it does the technical side of things, which is, the head bump. So it's got a little bit of a low frequency boost to it.
Right. You get a built-in EQ curve.
Yeah. And the sort of brightness of the transients is kind of softened a little, which most of the time sounds pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the compression, which, is a little bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I miss the clarity a little bit. But like I said, most of the time, when it's a mix and everything's worked out really well and you got it hitting pretty hard, like it can take a little bit of tape and it just kind of sweetens it up.
Yeah, it's sort of like a built-in limiter. It shaves off some of the transient peaks when you print it to tape.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's still got its uses. I'm not. My method has shifted away from tracking to it though. I just don't. I don't really enjoy it anymore, and it takes a lot of extra work and costs a lot more. And it's just
mine has too. I do miss it because it does take a lot of extra work. It's a rewarding work when you get it right and you feel really proud of having aligned the tape machine right.
That you can still do it, right?
Yeah, but it's sort of funny that you like need to put in all this effort and be proud of yourself for just starting with something that works,
Right.
Whereas, record right into the computer and hopefully it works if your computer starts up. But the things I do like about tape is when it does make things sound kind of funky. So one of the records in your playlist is Galactic. I don't remember if Meter Maid was the song title or the album title, but great.
That is a very analog record, right?
Yeah, very great sounding record, very analog. And when I hear that too, I'm thinking these things. I'm thinking tape just sounds really right for this. And also the way that you treated the sounds, the way those sounds are treated sounds really right. Can you tell us a story about making that record?
Yeah, sure. That was so Galactic was the first band I worked with producer Dan Prothero. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but great producer. Really opened up like the New Orleans kind of like sort of modern New Orleans funk scene.
There was definitely some meters nods to the meters going on in that record.
I mean, they're, that's where they live,
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so Dan, is, as far as I know, I mean, he was like a software engineer who was just he was a DJ and he was a big music buff. He still is. He lives in New Orleans now. He moved away from San Francisco. I spoke to him, a few years back and kind of just checked in with him. But, he, I think he just realized there was this great scene going on down there and nobody was really talking about it. And so he just started making records with, Mofro and Galactic and Stanton Moore and Gray Boy. But he lived in San Francisco. And so he would go down there and do all this stuff and then bring it back. But he needed an engineer to work with, for the kind of more technical side of things. And at that point, I was very, early in my career. I don't think I've been working for more than 2 or 3 years. But I was lucky to meet him. And we really hit it off. Like, I still a friend. He's a good guy. And so he brought that thing in and we did one song first. I can't remember. It was kind of a long song. It's the first day I met him. And I think that I got the gig engineering for him because I was willing to stay up all night.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that was the deal. But I remember it was a very long night. and we mixed that tune on the Neve there. And, I had really had the GML automation down and stuff like that. And knew all the outboard gear in the room. And so he brought the whole band in. We cut it. We even cut some stuff there in Coast. I remember Stanton coming in, recording some drums kind of at the last minute on there and a couple other things. But yeah, we made that Galactic record there. And then went and saw them because they weren't as big at that point. And we went and saw them towards the end of it at this great club over on Broadway in San Francisco called the Rock on Broadway. It's just a really fun night. It was like a good wrap for the whole thing,
Yeah, that's fun. And it's so funny, just that simple act of letting everybody else know you're as committed to being there till the finish line as the rest of, as the producer in the band can be enough to clinch the deal on participating in a record sometimes.
Hey, there's a guy, are you familiar with Steve Berlin? He's a member of Los Lobos, really great musician and also a record producer. He and I did a fair amount of work together for a little while here in Portland. He has now moved to Washington. I think he mostly works out of town, but for a while he was, doing a lot of stuff in the city. And he had this great term that just like he would just use whenever it kind of got to that point where it's like, oh man, how long are we going here? It's like, in for a penny, in for a pound.
Right.
It's like, you get it. It's like, if you've signed up for the gig and you've committed to be the engineer in this thing, you better be the engineer in the thing, right? I mean, this is, that's your job and it's a really important job. So, don't wimp out before it's done or something.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a good point because you're a dad too, and you've managed to, you're a family guy who's making a lot of records in a lot of places.
Yeah.
Sometimes, of course, you need to be able to strike that balance where you're like, all right, I'm all the way in, but I still got to make it home for dinner. So what advice do you have for the rock stars as far as ways that has worked for you and how we can, how we can keep that balance alive so that we still have a family to go home to?
Okay. I mean, there's some things, but I got to say, like, it starts with having an incredible, like, supportive wife. And I mean, my wife, she should win a Grammy, right? Deanna, she deserves one.
Nice.
Anyway, but you got to prioritize family life, especially when you get kids in the mix. Answer the phone when it rings, right? Check in with them, make sure you know what's going on. Like, don't be absent, right? I mean, obviously there's a lot of focus that goes on with recording sessions and mixing too, where you just really need to be able to keep your head in the game until it's done. But you just got to make sure that you're taking care of those people because they're your family,
Yeah.
And if you don't, they will go away.
Do you find that, I know for me, trying to end at a certain time of day, end the session also just means that I have to be like really clear and really accommodating with people ahead of time so that we are magically finishing up that take right in time for when we wanted to end the session, as opposed to letting it just roll into the evening.
We talked earlier about the sort of crash of the big music industry back around 2001 or so. The one positive thing that came from that was that almost an unspoken moment I don't know how it happened because it just happened simultaneously, seemingly throughout the world, certainly in the United States. We all switched from 12-hour days to 10-hour days.
Actually, I switched to 8-hour days. A little later, though. A little later.
That was just last year for me.
Yeah.
It's COVID time,
Yeah. I mean, but, I know what you mean, though. It's like, there was that 12-hour day was normal, or a short day in the studio. And I mean, I used to do, wake up in the morning, have breakfast, go straight to the studio, take a dinner break, and then just go till you dropped at night and then go home and go to bed,
Yeah. Yep.
7 days a week.
There's an engineer named Alex Newport who I remember when that happened, he was trying to talk me into switching my days to 10-hour days so he would have some support.
Right.
I'm like, dude, I'm already there. I switched too just now.
Yeah.
And it just happened right then around the early 90s. I think part of what it was, the studios were so expensive in the 90s. $1,000 to $1,500 a day or whatever, depending where you were. And so, you wanted to get as much as you could out of that booking as you could. So you stayed there for 12 to 15 hours or whatever. And then all of a sudden the rug just got pulled out. A lot of those big studios, unfortunately, started closing, or they really lowered their rates. And there was no reason to do that anymore. I mean, just burn yourself out. It just wasn't worth it because you could just come back the next day. You could afford to. All of a sudden, a studio that was $1,200 was now $500, right?
Yeah.
And so we all switched to 10-hour days. And at that point, I could have a relationship. Before that, it was impossible.
Yeah. I mean, same with me too. I mean, I think I any relationship started, before I got married, it started during a break between records. And then it was all about like figuring out how to keep it going once I started making records again,
Good luck, buddy.
Yeah. Rockstars, I am super excited to announce that I'm doing a full studio remodeling here at the Toy Box Studio, headquarters of Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm working with the amazing studio designer Carl Tatz to upgrade my control room to a Phantom Focus mix room, and have also been improving the sound of my entire studio room by room. The first time I heard one of Carl's Phantom Focus mix rooms featuring the PFM HD 1000 series monitors, I was completely blown away. It felt like I was listening to three-dimensional sound where I could close my eyes and reach out and touch the instruments, with crystal clear bass radiating from a 50-foot wall of pure marble. It was by far the best sounding mix room monitors I have ever heard anywhere. Check out my complete interview with Carl Tatz on episode 50 of the podcast and discover the secret to massively improving your monitor setup at carltatzdesign.com/mixroom-mentor. Some of the stuff that you're working on now, I don't even think I can pronounce the name, but one of the artists you were excited about is Kvelertak or something like that with Erlen.
Well, Kvelertak was the former band of an artist who I just did their solo record, Erlen Jelvik. It's a metal album from Norway. And Kvelertak, the band he came from, is still doing great. They have done a record recently that's collaboration with some of the guys from Mastodon and stuff like that. It's it's done great. But just recently we released Erlen's solo album, and he came all the way to Portland to do it. It turned out he was a fan of my old band. The band that I used to be in, Slaufeg. And
right.
And
you guys are heavy band.
Yeah, we were a metal band.
Yeah.
They are a metal band. But Erlen is, definitely a metal artist. Maybe his creative direction that he wanted to go in when he left Kvelertak was a little more kind of staying with that kind of just really like intense kind of sound, where they had kind of softened a bit, started incorporating other elements. But so anyway, they just called me up one day out of the blue, and it's funny because I have the first 3 Kvelertak records, and I'd seen them play 4 or 5 times, and was really a fan. Like I thought the band was great, especially their early stuff. And I'd been wearing my Kvelertak t-shirt around the studio the day before, and the studio manager comes out to me and she's like, yeah, you just got this call. Have you heard of this band Kvelertak? I guess they want you to make a new record or something. Like, I thought she was joking. I guess for one thing, they live in Norway, and we're literally on the other side of the planet. Because I was just wearing the t-shirt the day before, but I wrote Erlen's wife and manager Shelby back, And I was like, oh, yes, I've heard of the band. Like, there's like, oh, great, good. So let's get, she's got right down to business.
That's
Like, oh, this is
awesome.
a real call.
That's
So,
awesome.
so we did it. They came out and they worked with a guitar player from Seattle and had Matt Pike from High on Fire come and guest on the song. And my old bandmate, Mike Scalzi, came up from San Francisco and played in some stuff. And we made this record. And I think Erlen refers to it as a blackened Viking metal. And it's pretty awesome, man. Like it's definitely, it's based on Norse mythology and just stories from from that folklore and the religion that it is. And it's definitely worth checking out. And it's just been released recently, so there's been any tour or anything. It got on some best of lists.
Is this the one? So what's the name of the record? Is it Split from 2020 or is it right after that?
No. Yelvik is the name of the band, not Cabela Jack.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is a solo record.
Oh,
yeah.
Got it. Sorry. Yeah.
So the record is called Welcome to Hell, Hel, who is, if you are familiar with Norse mythology, is I believe Odin's daughter. And I might be wrong about that. So, but anyway,
awesome. Well, what was some stuff that went on? And I think I found it here, so I'm going to put that in your playlist. But what was some stuff that was part of making that record that is particular to making that kind of music, or maybe a learning experience for you?
Well, Erlen's an incredible artist. He's very driven, very focused, very intense when he's working, but also just this really nice, really great guy. And I think we became good friends over the course of that. We shared a lot of enthusiasm for B horror movies and things like that. But what was kind of cool about it is that half the band was from Europe. Actually, the drummer and bass player from France. Erlen's in Norway. The guitar player is, from Seattle. And so it all kind of converged at the Hallowed Halls, with some initial rehearsals and stuff like that. And then, in the middle of it, there was these excursions out into the woods and stuff like that for photo shoots and things like that. It was just this really cool kind of long, 2-month experience. They rented this house just up the road, so everyone was living together. And I hadn't done a record like that where it was just immersion for a while.
Yeah, I miss that. Is something I miss about the old way of making records, is just that deep immersion in the whole process for a while. Even if it's just 2 weeks or something, I'd love to just be doing nothing but that. Even though
it was unfortunate,
it make you a little tired.
We finished the thing just as the COVID thing settled in, and and so it really got he got signed to a big major metal label, Nuclear Blast, and which is just about as good as you can. And then couldn't tour or anything like that. So now they're just kind of sitting on it, waiting.
Yeah. Well, I've known a few other artists doing that. There's got to be just a massive amount of artists that have had to deal with that too, which is frustrating. But let's talk a little bit about the production process and pre-production and things like that for you. You talk about rehearsing with the band. What are some ways that you really like to work with the band from start to finish, and how important is pre-production to you?
It's extremely important. And, in an ideal situation, you start day one with the record, already having to familiarize yourself with the songs. There's nothing like knowing when something is wrong when you're listening to the basic tracks. Right. And not not putting that on the band, where they come in and you have them listen and you well, is it, is it okay?
Right.
It's pretty great when the engineer knows if it's okay or not. And you can save them so much time. And I've been on both sides of the glass so many times that, you often don't even know if your performance sucks until you're at home, listening to it 3 days later or driving around your car and you realize there's something that really bothers you. So having somebody in the control room that is familiar enough with the music that they can tell if there's a problem, they're not hearing it for the first time.
Yeah.
So if there's some spot in the bridge where the drummer slows down or something like that, they're going to catch it because they already know what it's supposed to sound like. So that's a big plus. And, with the Yelvik record, we did a lot of extensive demoing. I mixed most of the songs once already with just demos that Erlen made back at his place in Norway.
Okay. And then what about, and so would you bring them over and set them up to rehearse in the studio, but already have it mic'd up so that you're getting to hear what it sounds like as a recording?
No, we didn't record anything. At that point, we all there's demos made for every song.
Right.
So
Right.
we knew what it was supposed to sound like. It was a matter of was a matter of them getting to know each other as a band.
Yeah.
And also, us getting to know each other. It was the first time we'd all been in a room together.
Do you actually, when you're working on music like that, I mean, in Nashville, of course, you have the song chart, the idea of starting with a chart so everybody's on the same page. Do you ever get into creating, forms of charts for songs? Is there a process that has worked well for you for that?
Absolutely. I'll map out the form if I can.
How do you like to do that? What are some specifics about that?
Just on a piece of lined paper. I don't know.
Just intro, V1 kind of thing.
And there's some other things that are relevant, key, tempo, stuff like that. So we'll get some charts going for each song, and then they just kind of grow as you go. Eventually there might be a to-do list attached to it, right? Or some creative ideas come flying out of somebody's mouth that everybody seems particularly enthusiastic about. We'll make a note of it and kind of revisit on one of the overdub days.
Yeah, that's always smart. I remember watching my mentor do that. He'd always put a little star on the track sheet with a little on the back of it, with a little overdub idea, pedal steel or something. And I was like, right. Come back and do it later. Groovy. There's another record that you had in your playlist that knocked me out, Cake.
Right.
That is some great sounding stuff. Tell us about that.
That was a big hit record that I was lucky to work on.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a second engineer at Coaster Quarters when they just had their first big record, and they were recording their second. And they did a lot of the work in Sacramento, where they're from, or were at that point. I think actually most of the guys live here in Portland now. But and I was at that point assisting Mark Needham on a lot of things. He was hired to mix it, and they were supposed to have had all the recording done at that point. But it was a pretty funny story. They showed up at the studio, and we're I think like a day or two into the mix, and I'm just assisting Mark, running the automation, patching stuff in for him, doing that stuff, operating the tape machines and things. And all of a sudden, I think John or one of the guys in the band, kind of go to him, and they're like, "Hey man, so we've actually got a lot of overdubs still to do here. Some lead vocals and things to cut. And do you mind staying late after we get these, this mixer working on done and recording, that stuff with us?"
Yeah.
And Mark was, already at that point a big name mix engineer, and just, he was there to mix the record, and that was all there was to it. And so he looks at me, he's like, "No, but he will."
Nice.
And there, and there you go. And so, because I was 26 years old or something like that, a point, or 27, I was happy to stay 3-4 hours after the session, cutting vocals and trumpets and saws and guitar overdubs and stuff.
That record has got so that record, Rockstars, is prolonging the magic. And of course it's in the Spotify playlist in the show notes. Just scroll down and go give it a listen if you want. But it's a great sounding record. And I love the approach to, the song arrangements and the production on that. Even the trumpet stuff, even listening to that, I'm like, man, those trumpets just sound great, So nice job.
Mark is a great mixer,
Yeah.
I bumped into one of the guys from Chris Isaac's band at the studio a couple days ago. He lives in Portland now, Herschel, the guitar player. And we were talking about Mark a little bit, and apparently he's been working out in Nashville a lot more lately. So Herschel was telling me, so you might come across him.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be great. Do you, that record has a quality to it where it feels like it's very carefully sculpted tonally, the way it all goes together, and it's got a bit of a filtered quality to it that's very cool. Do you remember that being part of the recording process, or do you feel like that was a sound that was sort of arrived at in the mix stage?
I have thought a lot about that. And I think that's just what the band sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
I remember John saying some things, John McRae, the singer, I try to pay attention to what people talk about when they talk about their art, and especially when they're someone who's pretty accomplished. And he used to talk about something called the rhythmic network, which, essentially applies to, kind of how I like to think about arrangement. But, he was really owning it at that point, doing well with it. And which is basically to leave space for things, right?
Yeah.
So, you don't, and Mark was probably hip to this too. I remember Mark, turning a lot of high pass filter knobs. And you basically just don't need to let things take up space that they don't need to because something else is there or there's not room for it, right? It's already spoken for. And, it might have been that John was talking about percussion at that point, and kind of like how a couple different percussion instruments can fit together, how the patterns work together.
Whatever. Yeah.
But, all of that basically ends up in really great separation, and I think a lot of that is kind of built into the arrangement. People put a lot of expectations on a mixer to just sort all that stuff out. And, you can really get it in the tracking, at the point where it's just baked into the track already.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that if you're really listening when you record stuff, you respond to that. You respond to what you hear in the headphones and how it's sounding and how it's going together. And one of the things I noticed too is you guys listed your headphone setup on the studio along with your speakers, what I think is the Furman systems. But those are analog headphone mixers that you guys have there, right? So
yeah, this is what we use in the different rooms.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that, because that is one of the things that I think we maybe take for granted, but it can be so crucially important, is making sure that what the musicians are able to hear in their headphones is really, really good, if possible.
Well, it's a little bit of a hot topic for me right now. I've been using headphone mixers like that for a long time, even since, back when I lived in San Francisco. Tiny Telephone had I can't remember what the brand of the thing was, but it was like a console out there, and you would have the musicians go over and they just had a channel and they would dial in their own thing. And it kind of had little auxiliary sends built into each channel.
Right. Like a monitor mixer.
Right. Except it was made for headphones. And that way they could really get exactly what they wanted. Before that we were mixing aux sends from people.
Right.
And just sending them, just trying to, translate what they were asking for.
Yeah.
And that could take a long time. I remember setting aside time for getting headphones right at the start of sessions, where now it's just instant. You just give the people all the stuff to choose from. You label it well. You explain how to use the thing in a couple seconds, and they just got it from that point on. But
now, what about the pushback that people sometimes give, where they say that people don't give themselves the right mix? Do you find that's also true, or do you find people tend to know what they need to hear?
I'll go out and help every once in a while. I would like to get away from headphone cables, though.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a way to do it. And, I'm not sure if the technology is readily accessible. It doesn't seem to be, and I don't see people really doing it in studios. But, what we need is a wireless setup with no delay.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that it could be something to do with FM transmitters.
Right. Good point. Yeah, you might be
possibly
able to do something like that. Just give everybody those 1970s roller skating radio headphones with the antenna sticking straight up in the air.
That'd be fun. Yeah. But it would just be so great to not have that cable.
Yeah. I'd like to see no cables anywhere.
Playing on a leash.
Yeah. I'd love to see a cableless studio all around. I've thought about stuff like that too, where I was like, what if all the microphone diaphragms were just mirrors and you shined a laser across it, and then the laser bounced back and that was the reading you got back in the control room?
My gut tells me, though, to achieve that, which I think would be a really great achievement. If you could do it with maybe a millisecond delay tops, no more than that. Anything more than that, you're going to start messing with the groove.
Which one? Laser microphones or wireless headphones?
With wireless headphones.
Right.
I think we might have to get back into aux send mixing for that, though. I'm not sure, but I've just got a feeling.
You mean we'll have to create the mix that goes out to people's headphones?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why is it that you think a headphone cable is such an issue?
I don't know. I just hear a lot of complaints.
I can tell you why it is for me, because I go to put my headphones on, and then I always step on the cable, and then it punches me in the face. One of those extra headphones as it flips out of my hand.
Yeah. There's a lot of perils to the headphone cable. People get tangled up in it. You're trying to play guitar and the thing's kind of dragging at you. Or I can't imagine playing drums with a pair of headphones. I don't know how they do it. You got that thing sticking over to the side, and the box is kind of holding you. It's really just not that cool. And I think we should somebody should just today, who knows how to do it, should just invent a way around it so that we have just absolute minimal delay. because we just can't have that. That is a deal breaker. And then they should tell me that they're done with it. I'll buy one.
Right on. Want to know how to record killer drums in your studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with examples from Nashville session drummers in a Grammy-winning studio. Want to know how to master your own music at home? Rockstars of Mastering will show you how with plugins in your DAW so that your music will sound awesome when you finish your mixes. And if you're looking for a step-by-step solution for a pro mix that won't take years to learn, Ultimate Mixing Masterclass with Craig Alvin will show you a proven method for creating Grammy-winning quality mixes that you can apply in your home studio right now. Or if you just need to learn the fundamentals of a great mix, then register for my free course, Mixmaster Bundle, to get great mixes using simple, free plugins. Get started now making your best record ever at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy. Use the code ROCKSTAR to get 10% off any course in the Academy for a limited time. Let's talk about mixing. Tell us about the way you like to mix these days. Do you start with a template, or do you have a particular methodology that works well for you when mixing?
I mean, I've got a template. I mean, it's a loose template, but basically, I know that there's going to be a limit to the amount of effects that I'm going to get on there. I'm using an Apollo system, like a lot of guys are these days, and I think 4 delay lines and 4 reverbs and a couple of modulating effects is generally enough to get the job done. So, I'll set things out in a way that makes sense to me for building the house with the tracks, which is usually to kind of start with the groove instruments. And then I'll have my effects sitting there ready, right? Because there may be sort of spontaneous moments that I want to send over to them.
Yeah.
And that's probably about the extent of the template there, just kind of laying things out with rhythm instruments first, even just like I did with the console, really.
What about, do you still break it all out through the console to start mixing? Do you have things that you always use on the stereo bus or anything?
Like I said, once in a blue moon, we'll do it just for that sound or whatever. I mean, that was just March that I mixed a record that way. And the one before that wasn't that far before that, but most of the records these days are, through the Apollo system. Just using a lot of cool plugins and some great speakers.
What are some of your favorite Apollo plugins?
The UAD stuff?
Yeah.
Like a lot of the classics. All the actual UA stuff. And then I've been getting into some of the amp simulators lately. I kind of feel like they're sort of owning it as far as that goes. I like the Pultex and things like that. I've been a big Waves fan since the 90s. So I use a lot of Waves still.
Yeah.
I don't use the UAD SSL. I use the Waves one just because I've been using it for so long. I like the gray one.
That sounds great.
And I guess it's the J series, right?
Tell us about what you like about Waves plugins.
Oh, Waves plugins. I mean, a lot of it's the familiarity. They were sort of the first of the table with a lot of stuff. As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Are you still using all their early ones? Like all the modulation and delay ones? I don't even remember the names of all of them, but I would recognize
all the metas.
Yeah, all the metas. Yeah, exactly.
Mondo Mod, pretty cool, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't used Enigma in years.
Oh yeah, Doubler.
But the Doubler's cool, right? The Doubler does the thing that the Eventide, I guess, still does. The
sort of H3000 widener.
Yeah, you pitch it up a little bit and down on one side, and works great. I got into Altiverb a long time ago and still use that pretty regularly. One thing I have been enjoying is that the Lexicon 224 UAD.
Oh,
plugin.
Cool.
That's a good one.
What do you like about it? What are some of the sounds you get out of it?
Kind of have to get used to it, but it's pretty lush sounding. Like I finally took, I'm always so busy, it's difficult for me to do stuff outside of a project. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't like to, waste people's time. But I finally had an opportunity to do some A/B-ing between that and some other digital reverbs. And it definitely just had a lot richer of a sound to it, and it's just it's a good one. It's the kind of atmospheric stuff you can get out of it, sort of cool. If you ever want to get something that just kind of keeps going.
Yeah. Infinite reverbs.
Yeah, that can be useful.
Well, cool. Let's see. Any other software stuff? We'll kind of jump into our outro questions, but any other favorite software tools that you're really enjoying in the studio right now?
So the Fab Filter stuff is really, I mean, those guys are impressive, man. Like, I mean, I do a fair amount of mastering these days, and I don't think I could live without that limiter at this point. It's just amazing sounding. It's, I mean, I've gone from, the hardware L2 to, for a minute, I was using the Precision one and kind of moved away pretty quickly from that, and the Massey one. And
yep, I use that L2007. I use that a lot. Do you find that, is this one of those places, like limiters is one of those places where it wouldn't hurt us to have, 6 different limiters and then just try them and see which one we like best for each project?
Well, I feel like you can kind of get a lot of different sounds out of the Fab one. It's got all those different modes, like modern and punchy and transparent and stuff like that. It almost sounds like different limiters.
Yeah.
To me though, I mean, especially for mastering, one thing I learned actually from John, who, after he taught me how to record back in the 90s, taught me how to master back around 2000, 2010. He, was, it's not what you do, it's what you don't do. That's what he told me. And it's just great advice. And so I try to kind of have standard ways of doing things with mastering. Like, I don't experiment too much. I'm more, looking to just take what they did and kind of blow it up. And I can get that kind of consistently using the same setting with the filter. Or I'm sorry, not the filter, with the limiter. It would be fun actually to do that, to have like an arsenal of different limiters. I wish that some of the hardware ones could do the modern sound better.
Yeah, no, well, it's pretty remarkable how different they can all sound. Well, very cool. I haven't used the Fab Filter limiter. I've been using the EQ a lot, and I love it. It works great.
Have you played with the, it's got these different modes in there, the EQ bands?
Yeah, you mean like the analog, zero latency?
Well, there's that too, but on the actual individual bands, you got choices between, the mid and the side and stereo and stuff like that.
Right. So, I don't because I'm not doing mastering so much. So
just last week I got I did a big thing for this band March 4th, who I've been working with for a while. And they were doing they normally, sell out the Crystal Ballroom here on their anniversary show on March 4th, but they couldn't do it this year because of the COVID thing. And so instead they released 3 years of footage of the last 3 shows. The first one being one that I showed up and multi-tracked with this live recording setup I made. And then the others were just kind of things that the front of house guy had made with his Javon, with his console. He's got one of these ones that spits out like a nice digital capture of things. Mm-hmm. And it was great, except he mixed it in mono. And because that's how he mixes, right? So I was able to use that thing to like widen it really well. Nobody even noticed it was in mono by the time we put it out.
That's cool.
With the side encoding on those EQ bands on the Fab EQ, it's just really cool for that kind of stuff. It's subtle.
That's pretty hip. I remember a buddy of mine when I started out, Adam Long. He used to do this trick where he'd take 2 graphic EQs or a stereo graphic EQ, and he'd run a sound through it, and he would alternate going all the way up or down with the different frequencies. So like, interesting. If the left side boosted the lowest one all the way, the right side would cut it all the way, and then he'd alternate that on the other side. And I think that would be a fun one to try. But I know that tricks like that can also create widening sounds. So I've heard of people doing, if you have a double of the same guitar, this is one that I think I actually learned from Graham Cochran, who had learned it from somebody else. But if you have a double of a guitar, hard pan left, hard pan right, and it's the same sound, take the EQ and like boost the mids on one side, but cut them the same amount on the other side, and then boost the lows on that side, but cut them on the other side. And it makes the whole thing sound wider. Yeah.
So you got a different timbre at that point.
Yeah. So it gives it a kind of a widening effect, maybe because of phase, but also maybe because of just the difference in timbre.
It's just a different sound. Yeah. Interesting.
Very cool. How about a favorite hardware tool? Something that you physically like to have in the studio while you're working?
I've got a lot of gear, and I've been collecting recording equipment since I started my first internship. And, working for Dan Alexander back in the 90s, I got paid in gear a lot. So it's hard to have a favorite because there's, I literally have 3 studios worth of equipment.
Not as hard as it is to keep it all running.
I got to tell you, my favorite hardware tool to have in the studio is a spoon.
Nice.
It's a spoon. And the reason is, we're in this situation now. I do a lot of stuff with guitars, and, especially if you've got a studio in the city, like the Hallowed Halls or Hyde Street or one of these places I work, it is so easy to get RF interference, especially when you start getting a single coil pickups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so there's this trick I learned. I learned it from Chuck Prophet, who's a Bay Area artist.
I know Chuck.
Songwriter.
I worked with him.
And Chuck learned it from Jim Dickinson. And so basically Chuck and I were working together, and he was getting a nasty buzz off his telly. And he didn't use a spoon, but I kind of figured out a spoon is a good way to go. But what he did was he took a wire and he attached one part to the bridge on his guitar, and then he attached the other piece to a piece of metal and just kind of put it up against his skin. And so I figured out that, if you took an alligator clip and attached it to the end of a spoon, you can just put it down in your sock and it just sits right there in that ball of your ankle. And then you can just play away, and you just got a spoon in your sock, and it kind of adds some funk to it, and it's fine.
Nice.
And,
good.
It always gets a good laugh in the studio, but the minute you plug that thing in and everything just goes dead silent, they're just like, oh my God, that works incredibly well. And it'll save the recording.
Maybe Soundgarden,
all kinds of things.
Maybe Soundgarden misunderstood that storyline when they wrote Spoon Man. Maybe they didn't understand that it was about keeping the RF out of your single coil pickups.
That's right, man. That's right. I am the Spoon Man.
Awesome, dude. Well, I got one more question for you. This is the hypothetical question. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and we're going to have to go a few studios back for you. But you go back in time and find young Justin and say, listen, dude, I came back to give you this bit of advice. Here is the single most important thing you should know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
Well, I've had a lot of interns. I've been one of the guys that just continuously has interns since I was an intern. And there's been hundreds of them at this point, and they've all been wonderful, and many of them have had good careers since then. But one thing that I've tried to, kind of tell people is that, and something I probably could have actually done better myself, way back in the day. But, I told you a little bit about my life story. I was coming out of being a guy in a band and used to a certain lifestyle, and it wasn't a horrible life I was leaving behind, but I was committed. And, and basically the advice is that if you are choosing a new path with your life, then you have nothing to lose. And so you need to take the risks, make the commitment, and don't be afraid of it.
Don't look back, right?
You don't have anything to lose. You're leaving that life behind. So many people I see, they're holding on to this day job. It's like, just quit the day job.
Yeah.
That's not your job anymore. You're a recording engineer now. Or you're a record producer, you're a DJ, or whatever it is you're going to do. But if you really want to do that, you're going to have to just jump in and take all the risks with that old life that is now fairly valueless because it's something you want to leave behind anyway.
Right. You didn't want to keep doing it anyway.
Yeah. That seems to be the thing that slows people down the most, that takes them years to get into a career, if they ever even get there at all, is because they can't let go of that thing that they want to move away from.
Fear of loss is our biggest motivator. I mean, I still struggle with it now. I mean, I think even if I mostly love what I do, but I want to try something new and different, sometimes that pivot is the same thing you're saying. It's just being afraid of letting go of something. What if,
Yeah, well, it's dangerous, and you're way outside of your comfort zone at that point.
Yeah. Well, dude, great advice, great tip. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to hang out with you and to learn more about you and the Hallowed Halls studios and seeing all these great videos and stuff you guys are doing there. Let the rock stars know where they can go find you online. Where should they go check out your work? What if they need to book their next hit record and make a killer video?
So, it's thehallowedhalls.org, and it also goes through .net, or .com. You can also find us on social media under the Hallowed Halls. And, I'm not really a freelance engineer anymore. That's my place. That's where I do almost all my records. If you want to find me, you can find me there. I'm almost there every day.
Awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much again for hanging with us.
Yeah, Lidge, it's been a real pleasure, man. It's been great to talk to you.
I look forward to meeting in person, man.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thanks for listening, Rockstars. Cheers.
Okay. Take it easy.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who helped make this episode possible. OWC, Carl Tatz Design, Spectra 1964, Isotope, and JZ Microphones. Remember to use the coupon codes ROCK10 at isotope.com/rockstars for 10% off any plugin purchase, or use the coupon ROCKSTARS at jzmic.com for 20% off the pop filter for a limited time. And don't forget to learn how to get your monitoring just right at carltatzdesign.com/mixroom-mentor. And finally, use the coupon code ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course at Recording Studio Rockstars Academy for a limited time. We'll include all these links in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.